Hi, I'm Mike Clouden, CEO of the Milken Institute. It's a pleasure to see you all here today on this beautiful afternoon. This is going to be an inspiration for you. It's going to boost the creativity quotient of the room tremendously before we're all through. In case you're in the wrong place, just to inform you that this is Tom and David Kelley of the legendary Silicon Valley design firm IDEO. They told me it was legendary, so I know it is. And they're going to be talking, of course, about their new book, Creative Confidence, Unleashing the Creative Potential Within Us All. Before we get started, I can't resist having this many people in the room without telling you a little bit about what's going on at the Institute. It's been a very full fall so far with our London conference and all the other activities we've had, financial innovation labs, other things going on. We have a lot more to go before the year ends, and just within the next month or so, tomorrow in this room we're going to be hosting a breakfast with former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. And if you'd like to attend, you can join the Milken Institute Associates, which is hosting this event, and it's only for members of the Milken Institute Associates and young leaders, but you're welcome to come for that. He's going to be interviewed by Ambassador Charles Reese, and this is the first of a sort of home and away thing that we're doing with our friends and neighbors at RAND. The second one's going to take place at RAND on November 6th, which is a conversation with Nobel Prize winning economist Edmund Phelps, and Peter Purcell, who is the editor of the Milken Institute Review. So these are part of our special programming for the associates and our young leaders. So if you, I don't see too many young leaders in the audience, but if you're interested in the associates, please let us know. Starting a week from Sunday, our Faster Cures team is hosting its 5th Partnering for Cures meeting in New York. It's going to bring together leaders from all sectors in medical research to make collaboration happen, speed up the time it takes to turn discoveries into cures. There'll be about 1,000 people present. It's going to be a very exciting event. And 2 weeks later, our California Center is hosting our California Summit, bringing together some of our state's most influential leaders to help address our most crucial challenges. Now, this is going to be this year is an invitation-only event. We're doing it smaller with the goal of coming up with very, we hope, far-thinking solutions to problems out of the discussion groups, which we'll then be publishing. And of course, we have the annual Milken Institute Global Conference, our 17th. That's April 27th to 30th of next year. There'll be a few events before that, but I have to mention that. Our next forum is on November 11th. Christopher Schroeder is going to be here to talk about his new book, Startup Rising and the Mideast's New Resource, Entrepreneurs. Information on our other forums and all our upcoming events is found at milkeninstitute.org. Now, for today, we know you have a lot of great questions, which we'll have later. As we have been doing recently, we've discovered that the best and most efficient way to get as many questions as possible is for you to either email them to forumquestions@milkeninstitute.org or text them to 310-751-0715, which are up there. Now, as those of you who have been here before know, the best way, if you don't happen to have an electronic device with you to deal with this, is to get out a piece of paper, your pen, write down your question, and hand it to your neighbor who will have one, and they can text it for you. Okay. All right, our moderator for today's forum with David and Tom Kelley is Patrick Adams. Pat is Managing Director of Secret Weapons Marketing, an advertising agency, which is right here in Santa Monica. As an advertising professional for 3 decades, he knows a great deal about creativity. And since he also knows the Kelley brothers, he's absolutely the perfect guy to lead this discussion. So, Pat, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome everybody to today's forum. I'm really excited to be here. Tom and David Kelley are the brothers who have turned IDEO into one of the leading global design and innovation firms in the world. Tom running areas as diverse as business development, marketing, human resources, and operations, and David as the founder and chairman of the company. IDEO is responsible for some of the most iconic designs in the digital age, from the first mouse for the Macintosh computer to the thumbs up button on your TiVo remote. They've really defined technical design in the last 25 years. In the past 15 years, the Kelleys and IDEO have moved beyond the design of things to the design of environments and services and experiences. And along the way, they've analyzed the successful people and organizations and how they've been able to do this on a routine basis. And they've made it their mission to spread this success through what they call design thinking. Now, for most people, running a global consultancy would be enough for their day job, but in their spare time, Tom has been the best-selling author of a couple of books, The Art of Innovation and The 10 Faces of Innovation. He speaks on the topic in more than 30 countries. He's an executive fellow at both the Haas School of Business at Berkeley and the University of Tokyo. David is the Donald W. Whittier Professor of Engineering at Stanford University, where he's also the founder of Stanford's D School, which is an institute of design, which, and this is according to their website, has the modest goal of, to quote, create the best design school, period. They're here today to talk to us about a book that they just wrote together, which I heard is going to debut this Sunday on the New York Times bestseller list. You heard it here first.
I heard that. Okay.
It's called Creative Confidence, and creative confidence is something they believe exists in everybody in this room, and I, for one, can't wait to find out more. So, Tom and David Kelley.
Thank you.
All right, well, Kelley brothers, first, I want to start with the most basic question of all. What is creative confidence?
Sure. Well, creative confidence is really two things. It's the natural human ability to come up with breakthrough ideas. And we really do believe everyone has this ability. It's buried deeper in some people than others, but that everybody has it. So it's that natural human ability combined with the courage to act on those ideas. And in all of our research, what we found is the courage part is at least as important as the creative part, because we interviewed lots of people who through their lives had these good ideas, these ideas they believed in, but they were afraid to raise their hand in a meeting, right? Or in a social gathering because it would draw too much attention to them, or because people would start to criticize them, and so they had fear of being judged, and so they just didn't speak, and so their idea just basically ran down the drain. And so we've talked to lots of people with creative confidence, and they have the combination of those two things.
So, you guys work in creativity. That's your area. That's what you make your living, being creative and helping other companies be creative. What made you write a book about it, and why now? Why is now the right time?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons, but mostly a personal reason. In 2007, I was diagnosed with throat cancer, squamous cell carcinoma, and they told me I had about a 40% chance of survival. And by the way, I highly recommend being diagnosed with the terminal disease. As a way of getting your head straight about your life and stuff. Just don't get the disease, but like if you could for a moment feel what that feels like. But and so for basically a year, it was pretty miserable, and my brother was there every day for me. And one of the things we decided to do as it kind of got out of it, and it was clear I was going to survive. That I did survive. See, I'm sitting here. It was clear that I was going to survive. We decided that we would do some stuff we had never done before. We lived in the Midwest, and we lived in the basement of the house. He and I, for 14 years before I went to college, we shared a room, and so we were very close. And we decided we'd do something because we decided we'd travel together, because you never do. When you have a firm like ours that you kind of divide and conquer, he goes one direction, I go another, we never go together. And so we decided we hadn't traveled, almost forever. And so we took a trip to Tokyo and to Osaka and Kyoto, actually. And and that was really lovely. But we also decided we would do a project together when I was sick, and that was really exciting to think about. And so we're not very good at leisure, so the project had to be something that was productive, and so we decided to write this book. And so the books that you see here are a result of that disease. But But the other thing I'd say is, so that's the personal reason. But what happened to me at Stanford was to see this amazing thing happen among the students when we unlock their creativity. We do this thing, we use our process called design thinking, and we take them through a series, something we call guided mastery. We kind of hold their hands and have them have one small success after another, and that at the end it's such an emotional thing. These people who have never thought of themselves as creative before, they only thought of themselves as analytical, and they own the fact that they're a creative person in their body. I mean, hundreds of them are in my office every year, and they're kind of emotional, and they're basically crying, saying how good it feels. So that, as an educator, when you see that twinkle in those people's eyes, you want more of that. So one of the things to do is, okay, so I know if we get, IDEO gets a workshop and gets 30 people in the room, or in my class, which I'm missing today by to be here, which is a problem, is that if you get, I get a bunch of them in the class, I know in 10 weeks and a quarter, or in 3 weeks, we can have them flip. I mean, it's just, I know it sounds a little too hard to believe. I don't want to sound too much like Tony Robbins or something, but it is, but we see it happen. I mean, we interviewed 100 people for the book, and it happened to all of them. And so, so the question was, okay, so we know we can, if it's really high touch, we can get them in the room and kind of talk them into this, hold their hands and do this thing, get them in it. What can happen with a book? I mean, how many people could be inspired enough by a book to take action? And so that's the kind of, that's the kind of business or the kind of world impact reason for writing the book. So those two reasons.
Now, there's some discussion in the book about creativity versus talent. So what's the difference between those two? Many people think that creativity is something, it's a talent you're born with, and you guys feel differently.
Yeah, no, you can be wildly creative as an accountant paying the bills, as far as I'm concerned. Anything that you do, you can do in an extraordinary way. All you have to do is think about each step of the things you do, you can do in an extraordinary way, and that's what I think is creativity. What happens in our lives, which is really too bad, is that people equate talent or artisticness with creativity. Like I don't understand this, but somehow when we're kids, the expectation is either you have the gene that makes you an artist, that you can draw, or you can't, right? I mean, when we're kindergartners, you draw this picture of a chicken with 4 legs, and mom puts it up on the refrigerator and is really proud of it. At some point along the way, they start saying you can't draw, and then people, chickens don't have 4 legs, and then and then what happens is you kind of withdraw, and it's all about talent or artisticness. I mean, that kid could be phenomenal at kind of organizing his friends and putting together creative teams, or do something that's that is wildly creative in the thought process or in the way they make something, but that it's just not drawing. So we have this problem, and I'm all for people with talent. It's magical to see somebody draw or play the piano. But by the way, you don't expect somebody to walk up to the piano and play it the first time. But for some reason, we expect you can draw or you can't draw, like it's God-given. I don't understand that, but that's what's going on. The confusion you're talking about is the confusion between, is this person creative or is this person artistic? And it's too bad that they get lumped together, and then creativity gets thrown under the bus along with, do you have do you have that artistic ability? So, it's too bad, but that's the way it is.
Right, and with creative endeavors, there's this big misconception, as David said, with the piano, that it should be natural. Like if you're talented or if you're really creative, you shouldn't have to work at it. And the opposite is true. We talk about this a fair amount in the book, about how if you have passion for something, you will have to put in extra effort, but you won't mind doing it. And one of my favorite stories in the book is we interviewed a young guy who, as a high school kid, got to see Yo-Yo Ma perform. David and I almost ran into Yo-Yo Ma last week. It's a long story. But anyhow, this young guy, he's in high school, he sees Yo-Yo Ma performing. There's this huge auditorium, right? And among this huge group, 3 high school kids, get to ask Yo-Yo Ma one question. And this young high school kid who aspires to being a professional musician himself, but hates to practice, that's a problem. He's got his one moment to ask Yo-Yo Ma one question. And the question that he laughs now, Eric, the guy who told us the story, laughs when he thinks back on his one question. His one question is, so isn't it wonderful now that you're a professional musician so you don't have to practice anymore? And Yo-Yo Ma says, Eric, I have some very bad news for you. 6 hours a day, right? So Yo-Yo Ma, perhaps the most famous classical musician in America today, still practices 6 hours a day. It's not that it just, a gift came down from on high. He practiced. Yes, he's creative, he's talented even, but he in order to be great at what he does, he practices every day.
All right, well, what do you guys think prevents so many people from having confidence in their creativity? The premise of the book is that this is something you lose at some point in your life. Either school beats it out of you, or your boss beats it out of you. Somebody does. What prevents people from gaining it back?
Well, I think it's true. I think we believe really strongly that it's true. We have proof in our minds that people are all wildly creative. And when we first started the D School, we thought maybe we would have to kind of teach creativity. Turns out you don't have to do that at all. All you have to do is take away these blocks that are in front of them. And I think the blocks, we wrote an HBR, Harvard Business Review, article on this about all the fears that are in the way. And it's mostly, if you look at adults anyways, it's mostly about a fear of being judged. If I don't champion this idea, I can't get in much trouble. My job will keep going and stuff. But if I champion this crazy idea about the electric potato peeler, or something, and it turns out to be a bad idea, that's bad for my career. So that fear of failing, that fear of being judged. One of the wonderful things that happened during the writing of this book was, so I've been a professor at Stanford for 35 years, and there's another guy who's actually a real professor at Stanford, and his name is Albert Bandura, and he's a really famous psychologist. Really famous, as most citations of any living psychologist. And people who are psychologists care about citations. And he, unbeknownst to us, he'd been kind of working in the same field. He just called it something different. So his stuff is called self-efficacy. What we call creative confidence, he calls self-efficacy. Anybody who's a psychology major knows Albert Bandura very well. And his thing is about that you have a kind of a sense of the world and that you can achieve what you set out to do. That's what he describes. Self-efficacy is very similar to the way that we describe creative confidence. And so I went to see him in his office. He's about 86, and he seems like about 60 to me, but he full of life. And he explained to me a lot of the stuff he was doing, but I was taken by one of the main things he does is around phobias. He cures phobias. And I realized that he was curing things like fear of snakes and fear of spiders in the same way we were looking at helping people with the fear of being judged, exactly what you've asked. And it was so nice to see like a real scientist who had test subjects and a control group and stuff, because we're just kind of bumbling around, doing what we do, and so it was amazing. So but the trick is the method here he calls guided mastery is exactly what we do, which is with students or with clients or whatever, they're sitting in this place of thinking of their company or of themselves as not creative, and I'm just going to keep doing stuff the way in the same method I've been before because that's my habit, and this other thing might not work out, so they don't do it. What Bandura does with snakes, for instance, is he takes the patient, the subject, and he takes them through a series of small successes, just like we do. He has them kind of look into a two-way mirror into the room, and then he stands at the open door and holds their hands. And in a few hours, he has a near 100% cure rate through this step-by-step, kind of small steps. And in the end, they go in with a welding glove on their hand, and eventually they touch the snake. And the coolest part of this thing, and we see this all the time in all the interviews we did basically, was once you've beaten this fear, once you've gotten over this fear, it changes a lot more in your life other than your work or your fear of snakes. You become more willing to take on more difficult challenge. You have more stick-to-itiveness. You have more, the ability to get past failures more easily in lots of things in your life, not just in that. So these blocks that keep us from being creative are removable, and that's kind of what we concentrate our work on.
Now, I want to move on to some of the things you talk about in the book on how people actually do this. They've gotten over that hump, but now they actually have to create something. You can't just be confident about creativity. You actually have to create if you're going to be a creative person. And one thing you talk about a lot is a diversity of background and perspectives on teams. I mean, most companies or academics are working in teams. So why is this diversity of backgrounds? And some of the descriptions you give, I mean, these are wildly diverse groups that you put together even within your own company. Why is that so important to come up with creative breakthroughs?
Well, this story that David could tell, but I'll tell it about him, which is, when he proposed the D School to Stanford University, one of the things he said, paraphrasing here, is that at Stanford, like at all the great universities in the world, there are these specialists. There are these brilliant people going deeper and deeper into fields of knowledge. Literally Nobel laureates drilling into their field of knowledge. And what he said to the dean of the engineering department, eventually the president of the university, is that we would propose that there are problems here in the 21st century that are not going to be solved by drilling deeper. They're going to be solved by going broad, by having that scientist in the room with a lawyer, in the room with a business person, in the room with an anthropologist, right? And so that there are these very multifaceted, very complex problems, and that we're going to solve them in a multidisciplinary way, cross-pollinating among the different disciplines. And so, and from a business standpoint, so, we have 600 employees, it is really hard. It is darn near impossible to say, my success strategy in the business world is I'm going to hire smarter engineers than any other company in the world is hiring. Good luck to you. That is really hard to do, right? But it is not so hard, and we've experimented this a lot. We've done this a lot to create a unique mix, to have great engineers and combine them with the anthropologists. We have behavioral economists now. We have linguists, and you can make a unique combination of people. And so you might have a new form of multidisciplinary team looking at an old problem in a new way. And so we really believe that this is how we're gonna tackle some of the biggest problems in the world today, is not by sheer brilliance in a single discipline, but by smart people working very hard together in a process we call radical collaboration to come up with multidisciplinary solutions.
Yeah, what happens in that, because we're in the business of trying to innovate routinely. IDEO has to come up, IDEO has to have magic happen in every single project. And so it surprisingly does, and it's because of this diversity, just what Pat was brought up, which is that when you get these different people from different disciplines, and they use this kind of design thinking methodology, which is very human, so they all will sign up to it in a deeper way than kind of other methodologies, in my opinion. But what happens is, so in a normal situation, it's hard for people with diverse backgrounds and different ways of thinking about things to build on each other's ideas. But that's our goal, right? You come up with an idea, and then the other person from the other discipline says, that's a terrible idea. It won't work for this reason, right? We don't allow them to say that. Our culture says, okay, so that's an insight. You think it won't work for this reason. That's an insight. Thank you very much. That's great. Just don't say that. But But using your insight, how would you make the solution better, right? And then the next person hears that and says, well, I don't like that. And you're building on these other ideas, but it's because they are from such diverse backgrounds that they come up with unique to the world ideas. If you took all the same kind of people that have been working on this for a long time, they go down a certain path, right, that you couldn't possibly get here because you didn't have an anthropologist in the room, or you didn't have an opera singer on your team, and so they have different ways to attack the problem in different worldviews. So diversity is the key to this routinely innovating, because you can get to different places if you have the ability to build on each other's ideas. in the old days, for many years, we talked about multidisciplinary teams, especially at the university. I don't know if you know universities, these guys are in their silos and they're not coming out of them no matter what. And so they'd say, okay, we wanted to check the box that said we have multidisciplinary teams at Stanford. So we'd go to these meetings, and it was hilarious because everybody was just kind of protecting their own turf. They'd get a little irritated with each other, and they'd leave, and they'd say, "I'm never going back to that meeting." But at least we checked the box that we had the multidisciplinary meeting. But it's a completely different world now because the people have seen that this way of innovating works, where you have people who can really work together and that they've come from different places. And so we're hitting, if you look at these kind of deep silos, we're hitting spots, innovations between the normal, like deep depth areas that other people have worked in.
Now, you have 600 employees, so you can have an opera singer and an anthropologist in that group. I mean, most people work in smaller organizations. How do you bring that together when you have a smaller group to draw from? Where do you go? I mean, you have examples in your book of 2 people starting a company that turned into an amazing thing. How did they get their insights from other people?
Well, there's a lot of people in the world, and they're sitting there waiting to help you. They just don't know it, right? You have to. So our process is really about gaining empathy for other people. Like, if you look at it this way, most innovations that we think of come from you have a new business idea and you try to convince people that it's a good idea, or you have a new technology and you're hoping people will resonate with it, right? We go the other way. We try to find out what's interesting to people, what's meaningful to people, and then we'll take the technological risk or we'll take the business risk that will actually get there, right? So to do the way we do it, if you're going to start with the humans part of it, you have to go out and immerse yourself in the problem. So if you want other people on your team, I mean, it's relatively straightforward to we call this a bias towards action. You go out and you paint a picture of your ideas, and other people will join you. So then you don't necessarily pay them. You know, it's like if you have a compelling, inspiring enough story about where you're going, well, and I was only 2 people, I'd recruit 3 other people. I'd recruit the anthropologists and stuff because I'm able to articulate and inspire just how cool this project is.
Yeah, and speaking of stories, I think Pat was pointing towards one in the book, so I'll tell it, which is these 2 young guys at Stanford take a course called Launchpad. And in business schools around the country, there are these programs. I took one way back when I was in business school, entrepreneurship courses. And the typical entrepreneurship course, the final deliverable is a business plan, right? But in this Launchpad course at the D School at Stanford, that's like the price of entry. There's no business planning once the course begins, because the rule of the course is you have to have customers at week 5, right? And so how many minutes would you spend planning if you had to have customers by week 5, right? And so these 2 young guys, and they're very bright. They've got great analytic minds. They're both computer science guys. Ankit and Akshay are their names, and they because it's the essence of the methodology, they have to start with empathy. If they deal with humans, and they are not comfortable with this idea. I mean, they're both really shy guys. Ankit he'd had a business in India before he came to the U.S., and he says, yes, well, he said, we never talked to a customer in my old company, and as a result, we never had a customer either, And so, but they're bright. They're actually wonderful guys. And so they come up with an idea. They're going to do something with the iPad. iPad was brand new at the time. But they've got to start with empathy. And so they set up shop in a cafe on University Avenue, the main street of Palo Alto, California. And they spend 10 hours a day in that cafe. Akshay says, we're not allowed back there anymore. And I believe him. And so they are surrounded. They decide they're going to do something with reading the news, what is now called a news aggregator. But at the time, there's not even a name for that category of application, right? They're sitting in the cafe, and they are surrounded by humans who are, many of them, reading the news. And so they're shy, and they're not willing to approach anybody, but they got 2 brand new iPads there. And so people come up and say, is that an iPad? And they say, why, yes, it is. And they hand it to them and try to get these future customers to use their prototype software. And they just watch and see what happens. And the first few weeks, they'll hand it to them and they'll say, well, what do you think? And they said the modal response in the first 2 or 3 weeks was, this is crap. I mean, there were these super rough prototypes, right? But then in week 4, somebody says, say, does this app ship with every iPad? And that's when they knew they were onto something. So while they're still students, imagine this, they're still students in this class with this application. And while they're still students, Steve Jobs, who's still alive at the time, holds up an iPad at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, and it's got their software running on it, right? And so they eventually create, while in class, they create a news aggregator called Pulse News, which I still use to this day, and they get 20 million customers, right? And
They also got sued by the New York Times.
They got sued by
that
the New
week.
York Times. I mean, it wasn't all stuff, but anyhow, so we send the story off. We write the story. We meet these guys. They're lovely guys, and they're great. And they say, look, this is a company built on design thinking. They said they never would have gotten to this solution had it not been starting with empathy, this whole human thing that they were nervous about, right? So we send the story off to the publisher. 20 million customers, success story, wonderful guys who gain creative confidence. We loved the story already. And then once you send it off to the publisher, they don't really want changes from you. They want to tell you about hundreds of changes, but they're not really looking for the authors to give them more stuff. It's like, no, we're settling in, right? But we called them up and said, well, you might want to update this, because Pulse News, during the time, between when we shipped the first manuscript and when the book got published last week, Pulse News got bought for $90 million by LinkedIn. And so it was already a pretty good story, but gee, the 90 million, does win over some skeptics. Right, but the combination of already had great skills, and that's true for almost everybody we talked to. These are smart people already, but they didn't give up any of their skill set. They added on. They took this methodology with starting with empathy and doing lots of prototyping and building storytelling around it. And gee, these guys are very happy guys now.
So that's a huge success story, but another theme in the book is failure and the importance and the value of failure, which seemed sort of contradictory to the success you're hoping everyone will have. Why is failure so important?
Well, failure is just a strategy for getting lots of information quickly, right? People make the mistake of doing things especially when you're going to go see the boss. You want to do something. You want to show something really that's quite perfect. That doesn't help at all. People are not going to help you if it looks done. So we make these kind of crummy prototypes, and then people will feel bad for you and they'll help you. But no, it's just like you do them over and over again. It's an iterative process, right? Where I do something, I show it to my customers and users and all the smart people I know, and they tell me what they don't like about it. I write that down, or you write a piece of software and you have people use it and you see where they grimace, and then you say, well, I have something wrong there because that guy's having trouble with it, right? And so this failure as a strategy. One of my favorite examples of that was, I have this buddy, John Cassidy. He started a company called Klutz Press. I don't know if you know Klutz Press. If you have kids, they have these books and there's other things attached to them. Klutz Press. John Cassidy, lovely guy. Anyway, his first book was called Juggling for the Complete Klutz. That was his first book. It was a great book. Anyways, in that book, I really got the notion of failure from him at that time. So the whole first half of the book is about dropping the ball on the floor, right? It's not about juggling at all. It's desensitizing yourself to the failure of dropping the ball, right? The reason you can't juggle, I bought the book. I didn't know Cass at the time. I bought the book because I thought it'd be really cool. You could endear yourself to the girls at a party if you could juggle, some finish really like cool. That. Anyways, and so it's called the drop. The whole part of it is you drop the beanbag on the floor, and you over and over and over again you drop it. So you're totally desensitized to that failure. Now if you think about it, that's what's having you trouble with the mechanics of juggling, is you're afraid you're going to drop the ball. If you're not afraid you're going to drop the ball, you kind of have this confidence in juggling is quite easy, right? And it's the same way in a project. If you cannot worry about failing or being judged by people about your direction, then you go in all this. You come up with lots of ideas, and you go in different directions, and you have this real capacity to innovate in all kinds of different directions, because you're not hung up, that you're not afraid. It's not coming from a place of being insecure. It's coming from a place of being confident. And so failing is, I mean, don't fail in the end. I'm talking about, we're talking about in the beginning, it's a strategy for efficiently coming up with ideas and having other people help you improve your ideas.
Now, getting started on projects seems to be the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. And one thing you guys talk about is reframing the question. That sometimes projects fail because you're going after the wrong thing in the start. So how can reframing a question be as creative as solving the problem?
Sure. You know, this is a lesson I learned my first week at IDEO. David said, you're going to be meeting with a lot of clients. If your client comes and talks to you about toasters, start talking to them about bread warming. You know, because sometimes the toaster is not the thing that, it's not going to be the solution. You know, it's that old marketing line about, you know, your customer doesn't need a 1/4-inch drill, they need a 1/4-inch hole, right? And so the solution is not always a drill. If you've carried a Macintosh computer around, there's those million little holes that are the speaker grill. No drills involved. You know, that was lasers cut those holes, and so you could set down the wrong path. Right, it reminds me of a line from, I see a lot of movies, more than 100 movies a year, and there's that great movie, The Horse Whisperer, with Robert Redford, and the great line when, what's her name, Kristen Scott Thomas says to him, I hear you help people with horse problems. And he says, no ma'am, he says, I help horses with people problems, right? And when you reframe the question, sometimes it leads you to different answers. There's a story in the book about a young team of kids at Stanford who they had an assignment, a class assignment. You know, you're supposed to take that pretty seriously. And the class assignment is create, design an incubator, a baby incubator for premature babies in developing countries. And they literally flew to Nepal to do their research, to start with empathy. And what they discovered is, you know, incubators are kind of complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. But the real issue, the single biggest issue is maintaining that baby's body temperature. If you can maintain that baby's body temperature until it can nurture and grow, that's the biggest single hurdle. And so they ignored the professor's assignment, and they set out to make a baby warmer instead of an incubator. And so in doing so, they made it much simpler, and they were able to make something that was 1/100th the cost of a baby incubator here in the States. And they believed in this so much. It was 4 young students, and they all got good job offers when they graduated from Stanford. You know, you can get a pretty decent job offer sometimes. They turned them all down, and they moved to India and created a company called Embrace, and they've saved, or they've helped 20,000 babies so far. They're operating in 10 countries, right? But had they just done the assignment, right, they would have probably taken that class and then gone on to the next class, and you know, end of story. But they're out there changing the world because they didn't take the question literally. They went for the heart of the matter, and in their case, the heart of the matter was keeping that baby warm.
Yeah, I think that we often get too wound up in problem solving. You know, we hear problem solving, we got to get better at problem solving. And my mentor, Bob McKim, used to say that wasn't nearly as important as need finding. You know, what's the creative act in his mind was, what's a problem worth working on? Right? And then we're actually pretty good at problem solving in this country in particular, right? And so, like, trying to understand what's meaningful to people results in that what's the need, right? So, I'll give you an example. So I have a class at the D School called Liberation Technologies, and the students went to Africa, and they were supposed to look at, they had a sponsor, they were supposed to look at fire prevention in Nairobi. And so most of the teams actually looked at fire prevention. There's plenty of fires. You know, the wiring's bad, and you know, there's open flames in places and stuff, and so they have a lot of fires. But when they went around and they did their ethnographic work and they met with people, it just kept coming up and again and over again that what they were really concerned about in a fire was losing their documents, their legal documents. And we don't have that. You know, if you lose your license plate, driver's license, you just go get another one. But there, it's like really catastrophic to not be able to prove that you're allowed to live in this place, or that you're legal in this country, or whatever it turns out. And so as the students found this out, they decided to start a company that they put computers in a truck, and they go from household to household, and they scan their documents and they put them up in the cloud, and then they'll give them a copy of their documents anytime they want. And this really was changed the way these people felt because they were so concerned about losing these documents, and now the documents were not a problem. Again, the students quit normal jobs, they formed this company, but they reframed the problem from fire prevention to securing documents, and that was a better fit to these people in most cases. And so the creative act there was in the finding this need rather than how they solved, because solve was pretty straightforward. I mean, everybody knows what how a scanner works, and you just had to get it onto a truck and get the infrastructure. But like seeing that was the thing that really would be meaningful to these people was the innovation.
All right, now's the lightning round. I've got the four terms you used in your book a lot that I think were interesting, and they're techniques that you have found to be useful for people. So I just want to get a quick definition of each of these.
Okay.
One is a relaxed attention. What is that?
Sure. Relaxed attention is when there's a problem you're working on, but you don't use your, like your focused mind. It's like, let me bear down on this problem. You kind of hold it softly in your mind. And a way to do that is at a time of the day when your brain gets to wander a little bit. So for some people that's in the shower, which is why David has a whiteboard marker in his shower so he can write stuff down.
Not a pretty picture.
Yes. So, but if you work at this, you will find moments in the day that work for you. The shower works partly because there's no email in the shower, soaking up the surface level of your brain power. Right, and so for me, and try this out, works really well for me. Your mileage may vary, but it's the first 5 minutes in the morning. When you're sleeping, when you're dreaming at night, your creative mind is like running free, right? And when you wake up for a few minutes, I find that the executive center of my brain, the prefrontal cortex, hasn't like clicked in completely. And so when you hit that muse button, give us a try. It works really well for me. In that first 5 minutes before the alarm goes off again, think about some problem you've been wrestling with. And just in an unfocused way, the state of relaxed attention, see if you don't find some new solution, something that an idea that you haven't thought of before, related to that problem you're thinking about.
Okay, I think you called it the muse button, not
The
the
muse
snooze
button,
button.
yes.
That's good, actually.
Yes.
I think there's a product in that.
He sounds like he's from California, but he's really from Ohio.
All right, the next one, prototyping.
Yeah, prototyping is this iterative. We used to call it express test cycle. You prototype. You start it's experimenting. You start a little experiment. So you can learn a lot more than that from that. And in our world, it's sometimes it's objects, sometimes we're making a video to show what the experience would be like. We're painting a picture of the future with our ideas in it. We get other people, you go back and back. If any of those you're a writer, there's a great book by a woman named Annie Lamont who wrote a book called Bird by Bird, right? And in that, it's like she talks about the kind of how quickly you can get to the first draft, rather, if you got that blank sheet of paper, it's really hard to get started. You just do a crummy first draft. Doesn't matter how bad it is, and then then you can start iterating on it. It's just a question of kind of editing more than that. That there's just something totally difficult about doing it the first time, and so the sooner you can do that, the better the result will be. Not just faster, but it'll be better because you've done more and more iterations. So that's what our prototyping, our express test cycle is about.
All right, good. And my third one was Bird by Bird, so you've covered that.
Well,
Thank you.
there you go.
And then the last one was a phrase that you seem to use a lot at IDEO, which is how might we, as the start of a sentence. What's that all about?
Yeah, so we actually borrowed this from someone else who was introduced to IDEO by a guy named Charles Warren. And what we discovered is the way you phrase a question can somehow, affect the kind of answers people offer up. And so we started with how might we, and we use it too much possibly, but we use it all the time. And so because it, like how, it doesn't say can we come up with a solution, are there any possibilities, but how might we, right? Like we're assuming from the beginning, we're being optimistic about the future, there is something. And might, as opposed to can we, must we, might opens it up so it could be any possibility. It doesn't have to be a for sure thing, but can you offer up any ideas? How might we, right? And then the we, of course, is we're going to do this together, right? This is not innovation and creativity are typically not solo activities. We think almost all problems worth solving in the world today are going to take a team effort. So how might we, it may seem a little corny, we found it to be really powerful in our work. And so pretty much every question you'll see coming from IDEO will start with that, that three-word
How
phrase.
might we improve the lunch experience for kids in the San Francisco public school system? That we just finished. There's a big article about that in the New York Times. But it's you can see when you put it in context, how might we improve this experience? It gets you going in the right direction, right? Instead of sounding like a problem.
All right. You two are brothers. I don't know if anyone else noticed the family resemblance here. And you dedicated your book to your mom and dad, which was very sweet. Do you owe your creative confidence to them?
Yeah, so mom and dad were really, they were amazingly understanding about, because we did a lot of stuff and we took a lot of things apart and we didn't put many of them back together. It turns out if you take a piano apart, the pieces are really beautiful. David's got one of the pieces hung up on the wall of his studio and things like that. And so it wasn't so much that they guided us towards creativity so much as they let it happen. And as long as we're going to ask a question about mom and dad, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories from the book. We have this idea about personal advisory board. That you don't have to, if you're trying to change your life, if you're trying to bring your creativity out, if you've got some high stakes meeting or some important moment, you don't have to figure it all out yourself. You can collect a group of people. In fact, you can meet on a kind of a periodic basis if you want, your personal advisory board, right? And we describe in the book kind of how to go about that. But we realized kind of after the fact that our mom had like the best personal advisory board ever. So Mom, through our entire childhood, there was this thing called club. And club, they made no pretense. There was no golf, there was no bridge, there was no anything. They just met every month for decades, every month. And then as they got older, they thought, hey, what the heck, we're not doing anything else. Let's meet every week, right? And I'm like 30 years old before I figure out that these club girls, they call them, there's 8 of them, that these club girls, it's her high school class. This is the class of 1943, right? And imagine how well these women know each other. They have been meeting at least once a month and now once a week for 70 years. Think of that, right? And how much would that person know you and how much advice could they give you when, life goes through hard times? And so I've been wanting to write about them for a long time, and this was like, okay, better do it now. Because I'll try to get this sentence out. Club girls, 8 girls, they're not girls anymore, but
they're 90.
They only one ever left the club. She moved to California from small town Ohio. She moved to California. She moved back, right? So the 8 stayed intact all those decades, and we're like the best personal advisory board ever. And it's unlikely you'll be able to get your advisory board to go 70 years. Anyhow, we're down to 3. There's only 3 left. But for personal advisory boards, hard to beat that.
Yeah, go back to personal advisory board. I really strong. Tom said, I'm just going to repeat it because I think it's so strong. So I have a personal advisory board, and they're on my personal advisory board, and I'm on theirs. And every time I have a really important meeting, I feel like I look so much smarter than I would have if I'd have just gone in with bringing this brain, whereas, so I got a meeting, I go and meet with my personal advisory board, they got me just pumped up and I got all kinds of ideas I wouldn't have. So when I go in to the meeting, I really have lots more ideas than I would have, or lots more conviction. And so having that, you don't have to do it for 70 years, but having that I think is a great strategy for increasing your effectiveness.
Great. Well, we're going to move on to some questions, but I have one more from the stage here first before we move on to the audience questions. If you could pick one thing, what's the first thing anybody in this room should do tonight or tomorrow to start to improve their own creative confidence?
To me, it's, well, there's chapter 7 in the book, has a whole bunch of them. But to me,
So buying the book.
Buy the book.
Right, yeah.
There you go.
Borrow it from a friend. Read it. Is this notion of a bias towards action. I mean, what we really do too much is lots of planning and lots of procrastinating, and there's just so much that you can gain from jumping right in. You know, like jump in the water, meet the people involved in the problem. You know, have the guts to go talk to them. My students were working on the experience of taking the train from Palo Alto to San Francisco, and they, you know, rode the train. They talked to people who never ride the train. They went in and talked to Caltrains and talked to, you know, see what they're. I mean, just jump in and don't be afraid to engage with all the stakeholders around whatever you're working on, and then you know so much more. Then you can plan. Then you can be kind of reasonable about proposing the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, just a quick one. I would say, without even increasing your the creative output of your brain, just capture a larger portion of it. You know, so when I come up with the idea in those first 5 minutes of the day, I got a pad of paper there, because if you notice your dreams, you forget about them right away. So your short-term memory is dusting and cleaning all the time, right? If you've got a good idea, don't assume you're going to remember it 5 minutes from now. Capture it as you go. And you'd be surprised how many ideas you capture so that you can revisit them and build on them later.
The other thing I'd say is to you're going to have lots of problems, let's say at work or in other things in your life, and you're going to have an expectation that you're going to do them in a certain way and please the boss or please the family member who's asked you to do something. So do it that way. But also do a parallel project that you do in a creative way, that you like build muscles to do it differently. So now you've already delivered on what's been asked of you, so you're not in any danger. There's no fear anymore because you've delivered on that. And then do the same project over, and then you get to, like, you have this freedom to do it in new ways and without any risk. I'll tell one quick story about my. Is that okay? Why are you laughing?
Sure. No, go ahead.
So one of the things that people don't do is, in school in particular, is give the same project over and over again, right? I mean, there's no time. And the truth is, there's so much learning when you do the same project multiple times, because you've done it once, you've kind of got to the point, you're more expert than you were when you started the last time. And you've seen, in a class, for instance, you've seen how everybody else in the class has done that project. And you can take the best ideas from all the other people's things and then do it again. And you get better, and then you can do it again. And so there's something about that, about doing the same project over instead of thinking, oh, I'm done with that, or just living with the first solution that you've done. And my story that I want to tell is about a project we did for the kindergartners, and we asked kindergartners to redesign their bedrooms. And kindergartners are great, right? Because there's no fear there. I mean, they're flat out, and so. But they never get to do the same project over. I wanted to teach them. I didn't care about what the solution was to the bedroom. I cared about them seeing the power of doing things over again and using the collective power of everybody else in their class. So the funny part of the story is that one of the little girls, when she brought her little model, and you know it's made out of like sticks and cardboard and stuff, and people said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, that space next to my bed is for the family car to drive in next to my bed," because she had done her empathy work, which we had made them do, and when she figured out what she needed was like when they come home at night and she's really tired, Dad has to carry her all the way from the garage to the bed. So in her design, the door opens and she rolls out into the right onto the bed. In the next round, I had all the kids do the project again. Everybody's design had that particular.
That's great. All right, well, there's lots of questions have come in, so let's take some of those now. The first one is, you work with young people, but I'm over 50. Is there any hope for me?
Well,
I did not send that question in.
Care to guess our age? I mean, so no, this gets back to really some of the Bandura's work. You know, when these people were cured of the phobias, it changed their own belief system and what they were capable of. And so, yes, plenty of hope for if you're over 50. But only if you keep an open mind about what you're capable of. And so just
Marcy Barton.
Sure, I was going to tell my story. You tell Marcy Barton's story. But so here's my story, and David will tell his. I like to write. I've always written, and so my first book came out, and I was 45 years old, right? And I'd never given a public speech in my life, right? And so apparently, who knew? You know, if you write a business book and it does okay, then people want you to speak. And I really dragged my feet on that. No, that's not me. You know, I'm an introvert. I don't like, you know, people, some of you may have experienced this. You know, it can be nerve-wracking getting up, you know, on a stage in front of like 1,000 people, right? And so there was a time in which I thought, you know, that wasn't me. I wasn't capable of that, right? But eventually, enough people asked, I went out and got a speaking coach, right? And so this is the guided mastery. It's not like I had a gift for speaking. I didn't at all. But I went out and got a really good speaking coach. He was an acting teacher, and went through lots and lots of practice with him, and eventually got to where I was brave enough to, you know, take the stage. And now it's like one of my favorite things. I've spoken to 30 countries. I speak to, I don't know, 30 or 40 audiences a year, and so I opened up this new path at, you know, not over 50, but at age 45. And, you know, it's just been, you know, fun and rewarding and cool, you know, as a part of my life ever since. But only possible, A, because I was willing to consider it, and B, because I was smart enough to know that I couldn't do it on my own. I needed the guided master. I needed a little coaching just to nurture that capability.
Did you want to tell your story?
No. Marcy Barton is a 30-some-year school teacher who came to Stanford and went to the D school and changed everything in her life about the way she taught her class, and she's thrilled.
Yeah, she'd actually taught 42 years and says, 2-day course, and she says this design thinking stuff that she learned, she says, is the cornerstone, we have it on tape, on the cornerstone of my life, my career and my life, right? And so she reinvented her curriculum herself without necessarily much help. Redid her curriculum and started basically from scratch in the 43rd year of teaching the 5th grade. And you know, her class is noticeably different because of it.
Great. All right, the next question is, can you give us examples of how you guys have worked in the business world to teach people to overcome their fear of failure?
Sure. It's guided mastery. I mean, we keep saying the same thing, but it's guided mastery. You know, when we start workshops with companies and we get to the part where we're going to do the kind of fuzzy stuff, we're going to do a little improv to warm everybody up. Most of the executives decide they have a really important phone call, they run out of the room. You know, so it's like especially executives in companies just have done this opting out of thinking themselves as creative. I mean, something about being the person who deals with the money or being the person who deals with the detail of how the company's run, somehow, you know, they kind of avoid that feeling of being creative. And so, again, what we do is we have them do experiments. There's really something really powerful in companies about doing an experiment because you can convince the people that have to change. You know, like most people think change is, you know, you change, you change, you change, you change, and I stay the same, right? That's a change. And so if we can get people to accept an experiment in a company. So I promise you, if this doesn't work out and you guys don't like this, we'll go back to the old way. Somehow that allows them to take the risk, right? And so we're always doing that. You know, get a bunch of lawyers to move out of their private offices and move out into the center of the room, right? You don't think that's going to work, but it does, right? But they wouldn't have moved out if they didn't have the caveat that if they voted at the end of this 6-month period, that they could go back to the way it was. And so getting over that habit, the thing about corporations and companies and cultures is that they have certain habits, and you know that works in a certain way, and so giving up that habit turns out to be really difficult.
Great. We have our next question. All right, so do you have exercises or techniques that are effective at leading the leading of radical collaboration within teams?
Well, as David said, there's a chapter about this. A technique we're experimenting. So there's 2 kinds of groups. There's a group that doesn't know each other well enough yet, right? And for that, we start with a little speed dating exercise, literally where you get to know you know, everybody else in the room. And what we find is it breaks a lot of ice. You know, that it gets people where now they're ready to talk about other stuff, right? But then there's the other case where within a company where they know each other too well. and where the roles are defined and the hierarchy is there. And so the D-Schools just started this thing a few months ago, and so I think the jury's still slightly out on this, but they've had some early success with it, which is this nickname process, where at the beginning of an event in which everybody knows each other, you pull a nickname out of the hat, and that's your nickname for the rest of the day. And you're only allowed to address that person. Squirt is one of the things, and like Mr. Performer. And they have some names that are kind of big, and some names that are kind of diminutive. And so they did this with a big hospitality chain, and the CEO picked out Squirt. Right, and then the whole room went quiet as they waited to see what he was going to do with it, and he played along. He was Squirt for the rest of the day, right? And it was just enough to break down the hierarchy, and so that the people could collaborate in a slightly different way.
Yeah, we try a lot of things at the D-School, and one of the things that's been most successful about having the kind of groups collaborate together is the check-in. And so at the beginning of every meeting, we go around and check in before we start the meeting. So each person says where they are. I'm having a bad day. I'm nervous because I got another meeting right after this one. And so you realize, but I realized before the check-in, you're not empathetic to the other people in the group because you don't know what's going on in their lives. It's like this business. It's like if you're in business, you turn off the switch that says human on your back when you go into the meeting. And so if we can get everybody to be transparent and human about where they are, how do they feel, how are they feeling today, or what's going on in their life. And of course, in the early, as Tom said, in the teams that don't know each other very well, they're not very personal, right? But as the team gets to be more comfortable with each other, they get more personal. And then the meetings go so much better when you know where somebody's coming from. You know what else is going on in their life. This is not very businesslike, but it turns out that I think have much more effective meetings when we actually are in the shoes of the other people that are at meetings. So I highly recommend whatever group you have to try checking in. We check out, by the way, at the end as well. But checking in seems to be really important to having an effective meeting and worth the time it takes to go around the room and have each person. People reject that. I try with different groups, and they say, "We're not going to do that. Look, that's going to take 10 minutes. We only got an hour meeting. You're going to waste 10 minutes." Of it. And so, it's not easy to implement all the time, but we're having success with that. I recommend it.
All right, well, this question is about a particular kind of meeting, and the question is, what's the secret of successful brainstorming?
Well, the ideation in general, beyond just brainstorming, is partly about using the collective intelligence of the team, however small or big, to build ideas as opposed to tear them down, right? And so in a regular meeting, it's quite common that somebody will tell you as soon as they hear something that they know some negative data about it, they'll air it. And so when you're in a diverging mode, regardless of which ideation technique you're using, when you hear an idea, even if you know something's wrong, it's not yet perfect, your reaction should be, your first instinct should be, given my knowledge, maybe my knowledge is greater than the person who proposed this idea. Given my greater knowledge, how could I build on that idea? How could I take their idea and make it better, as opposed to how can I make them look stupid, or how can I make fun of them? And I think you've probably seen the cultures in which they do critique, right? But in a great brainstorming session, in a great ideation mode, it's always that building. It's like, I know a way to make this better, let me tell you.
Great. All right, the next question is, can you talk a little about OpenIDEO, which is an online forum that I think you should describe first, and what are the most important insights you've learned from this endeavor?
Yeah, so OpenIDEO is our kind of online platform for working on projects. The idea was basically, so we're coming up with ideas when we put a normal IDEO team. An normal IDEO team is something like 5 to 9 people on a team, and we were thinking, well, what kind of success can we have if we put 50,000 people, 20,000 people on the project? And that the kind of online platforms allow for that. So OpenIDEO is that where it's open to all people who want to help on a given problem. We set out a problem, we set out a challenge onto the internet, and then anybody who wants to participate. But we, like Guided Mastery, we say, okay, now we're in the insight phase, now we're in the evaluation phase, now we're in the and we take on these really big challenges, and we have people all over the world helping us, whether it's better eating for children with Jamie Oliver, or getting people to donate blood for bone marrow transplants, or fixing Detroit, and presently it's about how to create creative confidence in kids.
And as you might guess from the previous comments, all of these challenges start with the phrase, how might we? So I think the current challenge is called, how might we instill creative confidence in young people? And we're still at the inspiration stage. We've got more inspirations than any challenge in the history of OpenIDEO, and we've been at this for a long time. And so you can check it out. It is, at the inspiration stage, it's what's already happening in the world that helps with this. And there's more than 1,000 of them out there, and so you can kind of browse through all the very interesting things already happen in the world with relation to creative confidence for young people.
All right. So the next question was, please discuss the process of finding a business partner. Each of you are more productive because of your partnership, but this person doesn't have a brother. So what does he or she do?
I don't know about what kind of strategy I'd have for finding a partner, but I can say that it's become more and more important. I mean, this notion of collaboration and multiple brains, that it's a team sport rather than an individual sport, most of this innovation. So it's really interesting to me that the venture capitalists and the incubators in Silicon Valley won't allow individuals to now come and get funded. So if you go to Y Combinator, they won't let you come in. There's plenty of examples of it, the Dropbox and others, where a founder comes with a relatively good idea, and they say, we're not going to give you money until you find a partner. And what they want in that partner is they want parallel, complementary skills, same value system in the people. So when I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for somebody with the same value system but complementary skills. Like I'm not a particularly good writer, but somebody else I know is, that kind of question.
Right, and in order for that to work, you have to first acknowledge that, you have to have respect for whatever that other discipline is, right? If you're deeply technical and you believe that that's all that really matters in the world, good luck finding the right partner. And so we're always looking for people with lots of attachment points. They have this skill that they are very, very good at, they're world class at, but they play well with others. They connect well to those other disciplines.
Yeah, so we kind of look at it as when we're building a team inside of a company, that there's these kind of three overlapping points of view that need to be present. One is that they have kind of business viability, that somebody cares about how you kind of monetize this, how you turn it into a business. Somebody cares about technical feasibility. Somebody cares that there's a way to actually accomplish this technically, and somebody cares about desirability with respect to the kind of humans, what do humans value. That's our circle. So that tends to be when you try to form a company or a partnership, having those points of view and world-class points of view, and that everybody has the same values and that they're willing to work together on those things. It's just cathartic to have somebody that you respect who can do things that you can't do. It really feels great, and you can really move things forward.
Great. And this is the last question. I want to thank whoever wrote it for bringing this thing full circle, because one of the first things I mentioned was one of IDEO's most famous creations was the first computer mouse for the original Macintosh. And the question is, what was the creative breakthrough that led to the creation of the mouse?
So the mouse was actually for a product called Lisa. I don't know if anybody in the room remembers Lisa, which was had a strange naming process, but that's by the point. Lisa, and so what happened there was Xerox PARC was a think tank that Xerox set up in Palo Alto that was brilliant scientists, and they were really painting a picture of the future, you know, with pull-down menus and in Ethernet, and it was a cathartic moment in the history of technology in the United States and the world, I guess. And they, it's really interesting that they didn't decide to invest in it. They continued to invest in their copier business, which probably was a sane decision, given like this was, you know, they had a large market share, and they could spend their time increasing that market share and make a lot more money than they could if they tried this low margin, strange stuff called computing at the time. I mean, a mistake probably, but you know, a sane decision. But anyway, and so they had this stuff all worked out, including a guy named Doug Engelbart, who invented the concept of you know, moving something on the table and having that affect the screen. And so menus and having a desktop metaphor as opposed to the way computers were done was all Xerox PARC. So I actually, as a student, a graduate student, would go back and forth to Xerox PARC, and I did my master's project, a master's thesis with them. So I was kind of familiar with Xerox PARC. But when we got time to Apple, after the Apple II and Apple III, which we actually designed, Jobs found out about this Xerox PARC thing, which is pretty secret, but he found out about it, and we all went up there and looked at it. And through some persuasion behind the scenes, not in my presence, Jobs was able to negotiate the rights to use that technology. He gave them Apple stock. I know that, but I don't know actually what the thing was. And I don't know why Xerox agreed to it. It doesn't make any sense looking back. But Xerox and PARC allowed him to license that technology. And so when he came back, none of the stuff, by the way, this is a think tank, right? None of this stuff is, none of this stuff is details are worked out how you do this technically, you know, like any of that stuff. The mouse in particular was this kind of 3-button thing with little wheels underneath that was kind of interesting. So Jobs came back, and we were designing lots of things for Apple at the time, and said, you know, in his kind of totally understanding way, you know, it needs to cost less than $17. We can need it done in 9 months. We got to be shipping, you know, and you know, so. Anyways, it was a really interesting project. I mean, as a designer, it's really wonderful to have a project where you're designing stuff that's new to the world. So you get to decide everything. You know, if I'm redesigning a wastebasket, I mean, a lot of things have been done in wastebaskets. It's a little hard to contribute. But if you're designing some new to the world thing, you get to design everything. As a little off the topic, we designed the first laptop, and we have the patents on closing, that the top closes over to protect the keys. I mean, that's a patent, right? But it wasn't that we were brilliant, it was that nobody had designed a laptop yet. I mean, most people would have come up with something like that. So in the mouse, there were many, many things that we got to design how it looked. I mean, how mouse-like does it look? Does it have little ears? You know, I mean, do you hold it like this at your fingertips, or do you palm it like a bar of soap? And we did all those testing for that. How do you you know, get accuracy? But I'll tell you one, as we run out of time, I'll tell you one story that was really interesting, which was, as we're designing it, we had to make it so cheap, but it was hard to make it cheap and have it accurate. And we were so like spent so much time trying to make it precise, meaning if I moved the mouse on the table 1 inch, that the cursor on the screen moved exactly 1 inch. We spent a lot of time doing that. And then as we started to test it, we realized it doesn't matter. Right? Your brain's in the loop, right? So your brain's going to move it from here to where you want it, and it's going to stop. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 1 inch. It only matters that since your brain is, if you draw the circuit diagram of the mouse and the computer and the human, there's a processor called your brain in the loop, and then so like we could make the thing much cheaper because we weren't. It wasn't about accuracy. It was just about the perceived place where the cursor was, and that the person would adjust that to be, without thinking about it, to be exactly right. So there are 100 things like that. You know, the ball made noise on the table. There was these. In those days, I explained to my students when I give the mouse story. In those days, there was these things called pencils, and they had this. they had this pink thing on the top, and so what would happen in the original mice was they'd pick up the eraser gunk off the table and jam it up into the optics, and so all the original mice our solution was that the ball was removable, so you could blow out the junk in it. It wasn't an elegant solution, but that's what it was. That's the reason the ball's removable, because it would pick stuff off the desk. So, anyways, there's lots of stories about the mouse, but that's the kind of how we got going on it.
Good. Well, I want to thank Tom and David for coming to Santa Monica today.
Thank you.
They're going to stick around. Their book, which just came out last week and will be on the bestseller list come Sunday when you get your New York Times, is for sale over there, and they've agreed to stick around for a little while and inscribe a copy to you if you'd like one. So head over to the table. All right, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.